Take a moment's time to read this question. You would get these questions under critical reasoning. You must know the approach to solve these questions. Starting with the format, you are given a short text followed by a question and options. While you are on such question type, the first step is to read the text and identify the claim in the text. If you read the text again, you will understand a company is considering a policy change. And what is the change in its policy? The employees of this particular company should report at 8 a.m. Now, if this policy is implemented, it would allow its employees to report any time between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. The claim in the question is a policy change which allows a company's employees to report anywhere between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. instead of reporting at 8 a.m. This is step 1. Step 2 is to understand the question. You need to be careful with this step because reading a question doesn't mean that you have understood it completely. So understanding can happen by asking yourself the key word, the question. The question asks you which of the following employees' job functions would be mostly affected if this policy were adopted. So which is the keyword in this question? You're being asked to identify a function that would be mostly affected. If you have understood the question, step 3 is to analyze each option. So probably the first 2 steps are quite common. You would usually read the text, you're supposed to understand the text and you have to go to the question. But what do you mean by analysis? That is where this video is going to help you a lot. Only when you are trained to analyze options given, you can be very sure of getting the right choice. Now, to summarize this text talks about a policy change of a company wherein it allows its employees to report anywhere between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. and the question asks you, if this policy were adopted, which of the following 4 job functions would be mostly affected? Okay, let's move on to option A. Option A says interact frequently with each other throughout the entire workday. Can this be the choice? Perhaps when we read immediately, we do feel that A could be the answer. So let's reserve it for a while. Look at the second option. Consult at least once a day with employees from other companies. The option says consult at least once. If the employees report anywhere between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. and if the requirement is to consult at least once, yes, they can consult at least once a day because they have enough time. From this we can understand this is not a job function that's gonna be mostly affected. They can very well consult once in a day, even though if they report any time between 6 and 11 a.m. Look at option C. Submit their work for a supervisor's eventual approval. Irrespective of the reporting time, option C says they should submit their work for their supervisor's approval, which means whenever they complete their work, they need to submit it. So for this, the reporting time is not going to affect them because there isn't any time specified for submission to the supervisor. Hence, C can be eliminated as well. Option D, work without interruption from other employees. You may doubt that this option could be the right choice, but actually it is not so. It is a trap choice. Work without interruption. What do you understand about this? Without interruption means work without disturbance. Work without interruption is always productive work, so we can't say that this job function be affected. Therefore, we can conclude answer is option A. Interact frequently with each other throughout the entire work day. Will this be mostly affected? True, because if each employee reports at his or her convenient time anywhere between 6 and 11, they may interact, but they cannot interact frequently. So this is the function that's gonna be affected the most. Every time, remember the steps. Step 1 is to identify the claim. The claim in the text says rate of violent crime has increased in a particular state. Has the argument stopped at that point? No, it doesn't. It says why it has increased, because the text says the fault lies entirely in our court system. So the claim of the text is crime rate has gone up due to weak judiciary. The question asks you to weaken the argument. The question reads the argument above would be weakened if it were true that. So you need to identify a choice that would weaken the argument. Let's start analyzing the options. Option A, 85% of the other states in the nation have lower crime rates than does this state. Option A is a misleading option. Your text is very much concerned with the reason for the increase in crime rate, and according to the text, the increase in crime rate is due to the leniency of judges. If that's the case, if you look at option A, it neither strengthens nor weakens because it provides you a comparison. For you to understand option A better, I'll give you an example. If someone asks you why you have scored say less than 60 marks in a particular paper, you need to give them a reason why you have scored less. Rather, if you say not only me, even others have scored less, or in fact many have scored less than 50 in this particular paper, does it give a reason? Certainly doesn't. Option A provides you a comparison of crime rates, or it says that other states have lower crime rate. It doesn't give us a reason, or it doesn't weaken the argument. We can eliminate option A. Option B says sexual crime in this state has also increased by over 25% in the last year. The meaning of option B is not only the crime rate has gone up, the other crime has also been increased. When you use the word also, actually it strengthens. So option B supports the argument. Your question asks you to weaken it, hence option B can be eliminated. Look at option C. 35% of the police in this state have been laid off in the last year due to budget cuts. Option C gives you a reason that why the crime rate has gone up. It says reduction in police force could have been a possible reason for increase in crime rate. So C does weaken it. Therefore, we are reserving option C. Look at option D. Polls show that 65% of the population in this state oppose capital punishment. By the way, what do you understand by the phrase capital punishment? Capital punishment means sentencing one to death. Indirectly, option D supports the argument. If the majority of the poll, when you say 65% of the population, it means majority. If the majority of the population oppose, or if they don't want death sentence, then that explains why judges are lenient. So D supports the argument, hence D can also be eliminated. C weakens the argument. Therefore, option C is the right choice. Let's look at this question. While reading the text, while you're trying to identify the claim, naturally you must have experienced difficulty. Probably you would have read it more than once, and if my guess is right, though you read it more than once, you wouldn't be very sure of the claim. Am I right? Don't panic. Usually you would get these sort of questions, and I would say this is a challenging question. When you have read the text and you have read it more than once, still you are not completely understood the claim. In such cases, that is when understanding the content is difficult, you can go for structure based approach. Observe closer, please. Let's assume that your understanding of this text is partial, you haven't completed it, or your understanding is vague. In such cases, look for any structural clues. Now here in this text, look at the last sentence. The last sentence begins with the word hence. You try to think for yourself, when do we use the word hence? This word indicates the idea followed by this word is the conclusion. This must be the conclusion. So the author's claim is the idea stated after the word hence. That's the first clue. And there is another hidden clue. We use the word hence. If you ask yourself what the word means, this is to say for the above stated reasons, isn't it? So initially the author provides reasons before reaching a conclusion. Now let's look at this word hence alone and we'll go for the claim so that it becomes easier. We can understand just by reading the last sentence that the claim of the text is the author feels that the proposed law is nonsense, because that's what it means when we say the proposed law makes no sense. The author, in other words, say it's nonsense and should not be enacted. He says hence the proposed law makes no sense. Thereby we can infer he has provided enough reasons to conclude the law doesn't make sense. I shall thoroughly discuss the content a little later. Let's go to the question now, because we identified the claim. Let's move on to the question. Which of the following, if true, would provide most support for the argument above? You have been asked to find an option that should support the claim. The moment you understand the claim concerns with the law and not the content of the law, you can easily eliminate option A and option B, because both the options do not deal with the law, rather they deal with the content. They talk about the knitting needles and hypodermic needles. So we are very sure option A and option B are not the right choices because it nowhere talks about the law. Now we are left with two more options, option C and option D. Read option C. The proposed law would not deter the sort of activity known to result in drug-related deaths. So option C says why the law doesn't make sense and why it should not be enacted, because C provides a reason that it would not deter the activity that would result in drug-related deaths. C provides a support, hence we should reserve option C. Look at option D. The proposed law could not be effectively enforced. If a law cannot be effectively enforced, will we conclude the law itself doesn't make sense? Certainly no. I'll give you an example. We know that the court has mandated to wear helmet, or wearing helmet is compulsory. That is law. Is this law effectively enforced? No, it has not been effectively enforced. Since wearing helmet is not effectively enforced, can we say the law that mandates a person to wear helmet doesn't make sense? Hope you can understand now. So when we say the law doesn't make sense, ineffective enforcement or a reason stating that law cannot be effectively enforced cannot be a strong reason to say that the law doesn't make sense. That helps us to eliminate option D, and the right choice is option C. Let's move to the explanation of the given argument. The first sentence says the purpose of the proposed law requiring a doctor's prescription for obtaining hypodermic needles is to lower the incidence of drug-related deaths, both accidental and intentional, involving hypodermic needles. The very first sentence itself talks about the purpose or the objective of the proposed law. The law aims to bring down drug-related deaths. That's what it says, is to lower the incidence of drug-related deaths. How? By mandating that whoever wants to buy a hypodermic needle should have a doctor's prescription, like that of buying a sleeping pill. A sleeping pill can be bought only with doctor's prescription. Likewise, a hypodermic needle can be bought only with doctor's prescription. From the first sentence itself, we can deduct that hypodermic needles is of medicinal use. Move on to the next sentence. Even knitting needles can be lethal. Whoever has basic information about tailoring would know what knitting needle means. Even knitting needles can be lethal if they fall into the wrong hands. Yet everyone would agree that imposing legal restrictions on obtaining knitting needles would be preposterous. The purpose of the law is to bring down drug-related deaths. How does it aim to achieve the purpose? The law aims to achieve the purpose by mandating a doctor's prescription. Now, the author's viewpoint is, for buying hypodermic needles, perhaps you can mandate it with doctor's prescription. Whereas, when it comes for knitting needles, can we say that for anyone who wants to buy a knitting needle, they must have a doctor's prescription? That would be preposterous. The word preposterous means absurd or ridiculous. So the author's viewpoint is even knitting needles can be lethal, can be dangerous. Hence, for this reason, the author concludes the law doesn't make sense. This is what the idea is. So even if you understood the text, you go on to the option, the claim remains constant. The claim is the author states that the law doesn't make sense. The law here, the law which mandates doctor's prescription for buying hypodermic needles. And the text doesn't talk about hypodermic needles and knitting needles as such. It talks about the law that involves in obtaining hypodermic needles. So if you understand the text clearly, even then you can eliminate option A. Option A says knitting needles have been known to cause injury and death. You know very well that it is completely irrelevant. And option B says the benefits of hypodermic needles outweigh those of knitting needles. We're not comparing these two kinds of needles. Even using content-based approach, you can eliminate A and B. Initially, I given you an easier approach, that is structure-based approach, wherein you look for the word hence, and with that one word you can break the entire text into tiny segments. The very word hence itself says that the author is about to conclude, and it also means that for the above reasons the author is about to conclude the way that he wants to do it, right? So with that conclusion, we went away to analysis. We analyzed the options, and thereby we understood the answer is option C. Now if you observe closer, the emphasis and the learning part that should happen on your side is probably you may difficult in absorbing the content in the way that I explained. I do agree, but structure-based approach will certainly give you a helping hand in such cases, or in the cases of challenging questions like this. One. Second point, if you could understand and observe the ways of eliminating wrong options, definitely it will play a great role in helping you or in taking you closer to the right choice and minimizing the time consumed.